For today's cup of coffee, we're going to have part 2 of Mad Scientist. And I know this is a rough subject matter, and Youngest Kid has had a hard time with a lot of this because it's very disturbing to him. It's not that it's not disturbing to me, and I hope that it's disturbing to everyone that listens.
Just have to find some sort of humor in between there. Make light of the situation just a little bit.
That is true, but it's also one of those that, the world has a long history, and especially with this new religion of science, and that's exactly what it is. And those of us who don't accept it whole cloth are the heretics of today, and that's okay. But because that a lot of us see similarities going on, this is why you do have to know what's going on. And you can stick your head in the sand, but that still means that your ass is hanging out.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got a whole lot of people today that are very much in with this Milgram experiment, which we will be discussing here in just a moment. So, this will be the last of this. Like I said, you could go on for a month or more with this. And these are just the ones that were easy to find, because there's other ones out there that are little known until somebody reads them and brings them to light and tells other people about them. Again, secrets keep us sick. And that includes secrets like this, because a ignorant population is very easy to control. And so this will be the last night of this, and then we'll go on to something much more mirthful. Because, this is hard on me, that when you have to sit and read these things and go through it. And a lot of it I have had to read in the past for various and sundry scholastic endeavors, because that was one of the things to gain empathy. It's very hard to be empathetic to somebody who has purposefully harmed another living thing. But
it's to be empathetic towards those who went through the situations, who are victims of the situation.
Yeah, I have no problems with that. I can empathize with the victims, but it's a matter of having to learn even to empathize with perpetrators. And that is one of the things that we have unfortunately had the opportunity to do over quite a few years now, is to speak with people who have done bad things and have been put away from society because of the bad things that they did. And because I don't go by protocol there either, and would say, explain to me what happened. And, it wasn't in a judgmental manner. And people will a lot of times respond, and that they would explain what happened in their situation. And a lot of this involved people that had murdered people. And, there's reasons why anybody does anything.
Right.
That doesn't mean that people can run amok in society. That's different. And when somebody's incarcerated, they were usually a totally different human being than they are on the street, unfortunately.
That is very true. We have experience with that.
Absolutely. And a lot of these people do have undiagnosed mental health disorders. That's one of the reasons that we have the addiction epidemic that we do right now, is because my school of thought, and that is the same as many others, is that these people are trying to self-medicate. And until the underlying psychological problem, which usually deals with some kind of abuse, until that is dealt with, you're always going to have the craving to do whatever it is that alleviated the pain. That's just like if you've got, a massive tooth abscess, you're going to seek some relief for the pain.
Yeah, we both have really good experience with that.
And so it's the same if somebody is having a psychological or even a spiritual abscess. But it's a matter sometimes you have to lance that boil before healing can begin. And that's where, sometimes sugarcoating is not helpful.
Yeah.
It's a matter of knowing the individual, knowing how to approach the individual, and that takes time. And there's a lot of people out there that they don't want to take the time.
My problem is I take all this to heart, and it's like I wish there was something I could do. Like, I wish I could, like, somehow time travel and prevent these things from happening, but that's unrealistic, and
it is
not a possible thing to do, and that's something I just have to accept. And
right. And it's a matter of learning from it. Seeing the signs and the symptoms, and it's like, oh, we know what this is. We know how this is going to end. To have open discussions about these things. And that's something that's being prevented right now, and that is horrifying.
And the fact that similar stuff is still going on today, and it's like, what all can we do except, spread awareness the best that we can.
Absolutely. Because one of the things that has caused these things to change and to cease has been public outcry. And that's when things are hidden, when people are not held to account, when there's rules for thee but not for me, that leads to abuse each and every time. Absolute power will, destroy somebody absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm trying to pick and choose on the ones that I'm going to share tonight. A lot of the things that were done by governments, and it didn't necessarily specify which branch, it's all the same thing. And as far as the nuclear experiments that included uranium, one of the ones I'm going to share with you is about plutonium. And there was a man that was named Albert Stevens who was misdiagnosed with stomach cancer and received treatment for his cancer at the UC San Francisco Medical Center in 1945. Dr. Joseph Gilbert Hamilton, a Manhattan Project doctor in charge of the human experiments in California, had Stevens injected with PU-238 and PU-239 without informed consent. Stevens never had cancer. A surgery to remove cancer cells was highly successful in removing the benign tumor. He lived another 20 years with the injected plutonium. Since Stevens received the highly radioactive PU-238, his accumulated dose over his remaining life was higher than anyone has ever received, which was 64 SV. Neither Albert Stevens nor any of his relatives were told that he never had cancer. They were led to believe that the experimental treatment had worked. His cremated remains were acquired by the Argonne National Laboratory Center for Human Radiobiology in 1975 without the consent of surviving relatives. Some of the ashes were transferred to the National Human Radiobiology Tissue Repository at Washington State University, which keeps the remains of people who died with radioisotopes in their body. Yeah.
That's insane.
It is insane. All this stuff is insane.
What exactly are radioactive isotopes?
Well, again, radioactivity. All right, human beings don't do well with radiations.
Is it like something crystallizing or?
No, a lot of times the radioactive isotopes, they can be injectable or different things like that. They use them quite frequently today in cancer treatment.
Which just kills them quicker.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. This is just our opinion, folks. Other experiments with radioactive materials immediately after World War II, researchers at Vanderbilt University gave 829 pregnant mothers in Tennessee what they were told were vitamin drinks that would improve the health of their babies. The mixtures contained radioactive iron, and researchers were determining how fast the radioisotope crossed into the placenta. 4 of the women's babies died from cancers as a result of the experiments, and the women experienced rashes, bruises, anemia, hair and tooth loss, and cancer.
No.
There was Operation Top Hat. And in June 1953, the United States Army formally adopted guidelines regarding the use of human subjects in chemical, biological, and radiological testing and research, where authorization from the Secretary of the Army was now required for all research projects involving human subjects. Under the guidelines, 7 research projects involving chemical weapons and human subjects were submitted by the Chemical Corps for Secretary of the Army approval in August of 1953. One project involved vesicants, which cause burns and blisters. One involved phosgene, which is a poison gas, and 5 were experiments which involved nerve agents. All 7 were approved. The guidelines, however, left a loophole. They did not define what types of experiments and tests required such approval from the Secretary. Operation Top Hat was among the numerous projects not submitted for approval. It was termed a local field exercise by the Army and took place from September 15 through 1953, at the Army Chemical School at Fort McClellan, Alabama. The experiments used Chemical Corps personnel to test decontamination methods for biological and chemical weapons, including sulfur, mustard, and nerve agents. The personnel were deliberately exposed to these contaminants, were not volunteers, and were not informed of the test. A 1975 Pentagon Inspector General's report, the military obtained or maintained that the Operation Top Hat was not subject to the guidelines requiring approval because it was a line of duty exercise in the Chemical Corps. Now, you got to realize these higher ups, they have these teams of attorneys, and they know how to, how to spin the bullshit just so. Now, with some of these, as far as psychological and torture experiments, there was one that was called Project Chatter. And let's see, that one was, these were from 47 to 53. And this was where the U.S. Navy began identifying and testing truth serums. There was another one that the CIA did in 1950 called Project Bluebird, which was later named Project Artichoke. So I guess if anything is named a project, you know it's going to be some kind of fuckery.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And Bluebird was supposed to develop the means to control individuals through special interrogation techniques. And these are ways to prevent the extraction of information from CIA agents and offensive uses of unconventional techniques such as hypnosis and drugs. The purpose of the project was outlined in a memo dated January 1952 that stated, quote, "Can we get control of an individual to the point where he will do our bidding against his will and even against fundamental laws of nature, such as self-preservation," end quote. The project studied the use of hypnosis, forced morphine addiction, and subsequent forced withdrawal, and the use of other chemicals, among other methods, to produce amnesia and other vulnerable states in subjects. Project Bluebird researchers experimented with a wide variety of psychoactive substances, including LSD, heroin, marijuana, cocaine, PCP, mescaline, and ether. Project Bluebird researchers dosed over 7,000 U.S. military personnel with LSD without their knowledge or consent at the Edgewood Arsenal in Maryland. Years after these experiments, more than 1,000 of these soldiers suffered from several illnesses, including depression and epilepsy. Many of them attempted suicide. And we have to wonder today, we've got, I think the statistic says that there's 22 former military, veterans that commit suicide a day. Mm-hmm. And this is something I've always wondered. Did they inject these people or, expose them to something?
It's very possible.
And because if these people are dead, they don't have to pay government benefits to them.
That's true.
So, where Dad was, did not have to go to Vietnam, but where he went through the VA and stuff, that was one of the things they kept asking him over and over, were you exposed to Agent Orange? And that was something that they used as a deforestation thing when they were in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And that it truly screwed those guys up horribly.
Was he exposed to it?
Not that he knew of. But now, even as far as being on, who knows? Who knows? Within these, that they have experimented on these people as far as that they volunteered to serve this country, to protect this country, and the powers that be have always looked at these people as being expendable.
No,
they look at the population. They look at the population as being expendable. More so now than ever before. Okay, in 1952, professional tennis player Harold, I've always had trouble with that name, Harold Blauer died when he was injected with a fatal dose of mescaline. And that was, mescaline derivative, at the New York State Psychiatric Institute of Columbia University. The United States Department of Defense, which sponsored the injection, worked in collusion with the Department of Justice and the New York State Attorney General to conceal evidence of its involvement in the experiment for 23 years. Then we have MK Ultra. Yeah.
The most popular of them all.
Yeah. And poor little Ted Kaczynski, that he was, he probably had, oh my goodness, what am I thinking of? The form of autism. Asperger's, because he was brilliant. And that he was enrolled, I can't remember if it was Harvard or where it was, when he was still a teenager.
I think it was Harvard. And
that he was, he was subjected to the MK Ultra. So we can understand how that affected him. But he was a brilliant man.
Yeah.
In 1953, the CIA placed several of its interrogation and mind control programs under the direction of a single program known by the code name MK Ultra, after CIA Director Allen Dulles complained about not having enough, quote, human guinea pigs to try these extraordinary techniques, end quote. The MK Ultra project was under the direct command of Dr. Sidney Gottlieb of the Technical Services Division. The project received over $25 million. Now, this was in 1953. So $25 million then was probably about like $25 billion today, and involved hundreds of experiments on human subjects at 80 different institutions. In a memo describing the purpose of one MK Ultra subprogram, Richard Helms said, "We intend to investigate the development of a chemical material which causes a reversible, non-toxic, aberrant mental state, the specific nature of which can be reasonably well predicted for each individual. This material could potentially aid in discrediting individuals, eliciting information, and implanting suggestions and other forms of mental control." These are psyops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of research about psyops.
Absolutely, we have. We're living through them. In 1954, the CIA's project QK Hilltop was created to study Chinese brainwashing techniques. And under the direction of Dr. Harold Wolf, he requested that the CIA provide him any information they could find regarding threats, coercion, imprisonment, deprivation, humiliation, torture, brainwashing, black psychiatry, hypnosis, or any combination of these with or without chemical agents. So they wanted the Chinese techniques. They've been at it longer.
Wow, that's fucked up.
It's all fucked up. Then we have George Hunter White, who oversaw drug experiments for the CIA as part of Operation Midnight Climax, another of MK Ultra sub-projects. And there was a web of CIA-run safe houses in San Francisco, Marin, and New York, which were established to study the effects of LSD on unconsenting individuals. Prostitutes on the CIA payroll were instructed to lure clients back to the safe houses, where they were then applied with a wide range of substances, including LSD, and monitored behind one-way glass. Several significant operational techniques were developed in this theater, including extensive research into sexual blackmail, surveillance technology, and the possible use of mind-altering drugs in field operations.
No.
So, yeah, sounds like
that
sounds like somebody got Epstein on that one. Anyhow, Dr. Robert Heath of Tulane University performed experiments on 42 patients with schizophrenia and prisoners in the Louisiana State Penitentiary. The experiments were funded by the U.S. Army. In the studies, he dosed them with LSD and another drug that induced catalepsy, and implanted electrodes into the septal area of the brain to stimulate it and take EEG readings. Because when you've got somebody labeled as mentally ill and or prisoner, which are usually a lot of times the same people, these are throwaway people. Yeah. There are no throwaway people.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Nobody's, throwaway.
No, they're not. Then
people.
Yeah, well, you've got cruel people. You've got evil. And this stuff is more evil than any kind of, some of these people that wants to be bitching about Halloween, they need to read some of this stuff real. Let them look at true evil versus a pumpkin on somebody's porch, And
some spooky decorations.
Right. So, anyhow, in 1961, in response to the Nuremberg trials, the Yale psychologist Stanley Milgram. Now, this is one of my favorites. I do not think this was cruel. Not at all. They're saying that it was mad scientist. I'm not. I'm saying that this one had a lot of validity. Stanley Milgram performed his obedience to authority study, and also known as the Milgram experiment. That's what I've always known it as. To determine if it was possible the Nazi genocide could have resulted from millions of people who were just following orders. The Milgram experiment raised questions about the ethics of scientific experimentation because of the extreme emotional stress suffered by the participants, who were told as part of the experiment to apply electric shocks to test subjects who were actors and did not really receive the electric shocks. Now, I'm going to fill in the gaps on this because in the Milgram experiment, you had somebody that came in with a clipboard and a lab coat. That was it. Yeah. They didn't say who they were, nothing like that. They just said, hey, this is what you're going to do. And they just stood there with the clipboard and stuff. And if somebody had a question as far as administering the shocks, they would just nod at them or say, go ahead. These people were free to leave at any time. They were free to stand up, look at the guy in the lab coat and go, fuck you, and go out. Now, the people that went ahead with this, they could not deal with what they did. They were not pressured to do it. They were encouraged to do it. So that excuse, I was just following orders, does not, it's still personal responsibility and accountability.
Yeah, did any of them ever stand up and
Absolutely.
be like, no?
They did. No, there were those that did stand up and they're like, I'm not doing it. But they were so few. It's just like I had watched a news story today that there was a woman, I can't remember where it was, she was on a subway or something, that was sexually assaulted, and that they had gone through like 20-some stops that anybody could have called the authorities or whatever. They had their cell phones out videoing the assault, and it was somebody else that was, I don't know, a worker for the subway or whatever it was, the rail line, and that they reported it. And that is one thing. The police chief, I will say, he did what he was supposed to do. And when they got there, the perpetrator was in the act of raping this woman. Now, they have to say alleged, because to prevent them from being sued, he drags the man off of this woman. And he looked at those people, he said, and it was basically, what is wrong with you? That you would be videoing this instead of calling 911.
Yeah. And what did any of them say?
Nothing. There was another experiment and something else as I was researching this, and that what they did, and it was sort of an offshoot of what Milgram did, they had these college kids that were going to some kind of a lecture or something like that was on being a good Samaritan. And in the pathway of them getting to this building, it was a crisis actor that needed help or whatever. Over 50% ignored this individual, walked around them. This is why, be the change you want to see in the world. You know? Most people do not want to get involved. See nothing, say. That's called the sin of omission.
Yeah.
Because if you see something wrong like that and you don't do anything to stop it, you're guilty.
Absolutely.
That's the same as aiding and abetting.
Yeah.
Now, this is one of my favorites also. It's questionable. I don't think it goes into mad scientists, and this is the Stanford prison experiment.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorites because it is... Now, Zimbardo, did he cross a line? I'd say he probably crossed several lines.
Oh, yeah.
But he admitted what happened with him, too, because he's human. And in 1971, you had Stanford University psychologist Philip Zimbardo. He conducted the Stanford prison experiment in which 24 male students were randomly assigned roles of prisoners and guards in a mock prison situated in the basement of a Stanford psychology building. The participants adapted to their roles beyond Zimbardo's expectations, with prison guards exhibiting authoritarian status and psychologically abusing the prisoners who were passive in their acceptance of the abuse. The experiment was largely controversial, with criticisms aimed toward the lack of scientific principles and a control group, and for ethical concerns regarding Zimbardo's lack of intervention in the prisoner abuse. Because he got caught up in it too.
Yeah.
Because he was supposed to be the warden. And this experiment was supposed to go on for like 2 weeks. They had to pull it in a matter of days. We've got this going on around us daily.
We got it going on in modern prisons
Oh,
and
we've
jails.
got it going on out in the streets.
That's
As
true.
far
We got it
as-
going on in businesses as well.
Look at the Loudoun County, how they have handled this with the school board meetings lately.
Oh, there have been many accounts of people for years, decades, of school basically being like prison for kids.
Right. But as far as some people have, you give them a little bit of power, they don't know what to do with it. They think that it's because that they've got whatever it is, authority, because they've got a name placard, or because that they've got a badge, or whatever it is, that it's their right to abuse others. And that goes not just within the corrections industry, the law enforcement industry. It goes on in the medical industry, anything like that. It can go on in a work environment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as far as people falling into the trap of being the victims, we're seeing that too. So it's most interesting. Now, some of these are the next couple, before I end with the worst one. Head transplants.
See, that one's not... I don't think this one's going to be as horrible for me, because that stuff fascinates me. But,
Well, yeah, but it's still horrible.
I mean,
it's
yeah, in reality,
horrible.
but the thought of it is like, yeah, he stuck a head on the other person.
And then I actually did find it is a submitted, I think it was peer reviewed, it was a research paper was what it was, about current attempts at head transplants. And I think it was written in 2019.
Yeah.
So I will include that link. It's not like they just stopped.
I mean, that's becoming like an actual thing for those people who are paralyzed, to get like a cadaver body or something, and
Well, I can see
or a
that.
person who wanted a assisted suicide or whatever, for those people who cannot use their body.
Well, I can see the point in that. But as far as these people that they want to live forever, that's what I always fear, that people are going to use it for the worst possible purposes rather than the best.
Well, for those cases, I choose to believe that they're doing it for the people who honestly are paralyzed. And
Well, now
cannot
I'm
use.
glad. See, that's why I wanted you here. It gives me a different spin on it, so that I can see how that would have validity. A head transplant is an experimental surgical operation involving the grafting of one organism's head onto the body of another. In many experiments, the recipient's head has not been removed, but the other one has. The other one's has been. So they got two heads. Is that what it is?
Yes.
And some of them.
Almost like the conjoined twins. There are actually
Okay.
theories of people attempting to do that in ye old times
Yep.
for freak shows and such.
Experimentation in animals began in the early 1900s, and then as of 2021, no lasting success has been achieved. Alexis Carrel was a French surgeon who had developed improved surgical methods to connect blood vessels in the context of organ transplantation. In 1908, he collaborated with the American Charles Claude Guthrie to attempt to graft the head of one dog on an intact second dog. The grafted head showed some reflexes early on but deteriorated quickly, and the animal was killed after a few hours. Carl's work on organ transplantation later earned a Nobel Prize. Guthrie was probably excluded because of this controversial work on head transplantation.
Well, yeah.
I guess that'd be a label that would kind of follow you. In 1954, this was the one that we were familiar of, Vladimir, dear God help me, Dimitrov, a Soviet surgeon who had done important work to improve coronary bypass surgery, performed an experiment in which he grafted a dog's head and upper body, including the front legs, onto another dog.
Mm-hmm.
And they have video footage of that, and it's...
Yeah, they have video footage of just the dog head on a table, and that's it, with a lot of tubes going up into it.
Oh, they had some where you could see more of it than that. I found that. And the effort was focused on how to provide blood supply to the donor head and upper body and not on grafting the nervous systems. The dogs generally survived a few days. One survived 29 days. The grafted body parts were able to move and react to stimulus. The animals died due to transplant rejection.
Yeah.
Then in 1965, Robert J. White did a series of experiments in which he attempted to graft only the vascular system of isolated dog brains onto existing dogs. In 1970, he did 4 experiments in which he cut the head off of a monkey and connected the blood vessels of another monkey head to it. He did not attempt to connect the nervous systems. White used deep hypothermia to protect the brains during the times when they were cut off from blood during the procedure. And the recipient bodies had to be kept alive with mechanical ventilation and drugs to stimulate the heart.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm sorry, but I cannot imagine going into a lab and this monkey body.
I mean, I would be horrified, but I would also be like, that's fascinating.
So,
But grotesque.
The grafted heads were able to function. The eyes tracked moving objects, and it could chew and swallow.
Mm-hmm.
These experiments were reported and criticized in the media and were considered barbaric by animal rights activists. There were few animal experiments on head transplantation for many years after this. Guess what? They're back.
Yeah. I think it's perfectly ethical to do so if it was a dog that died, let's say, of natural causes or got hit by a car or any other animal that got hit by a car or whatever.
Well, if it's already damaged, they're not going to use it.
Yeah.
No. So it's not.
I think that's an ethical way to do it, though.
These people have no ethics, honey. And they do it in the name of science. For real. In 2012, Xiaoxing Ren published work in which he grafted the head of a mouse onto another mouse's body. Again, the focus was on how to avoid harm from the loss of blood supply. With his protocol, the grafted head survived up to 6 months. In 2013, Sergio Canavero published a protocol he said would make human head transplantation possible. Then, in 2015, Wren again published work in which he cut off the heads of mice but left the brain stem in place and then connected the vasculature of the donor head to the recipient body. This work was an effort to address whether it was possible to keep the body of the recipient animal alive without life support. In 2016, Wren and Canavero published a review of attempted as well as possible neuroprotection strategies that they said should be researched for potential use in head transplantation procedure. So they're still working on it. And that was, like I said, that was one of the research papers that I will include in the description link.
Well, see, I don't see a huge problem with this one if it is used for the right purposes. Like, for example, the face transplants, those were very taboo for a long time. Still kind of are. But those for the people who have facial damage, that's almost a blessing for them. And they're still not perfect, but they're better than, just like scarification and such like that.
That one woman that the chimpanzee ripped her face off. And I think she was finally able to receive a face transplant, wasn't she?
Yeah.
So, I mean, on things like that, and people can donate body parts.
Exactly.
That's...
People can
that's
donate,
a choice. I get that.
Donate organs, donate body parts.
And it's not that, like I said, a lot of this is Frankenstein-esque, very much so. But now, at least these are bizarre, but I do understand that they could have validity. This next one, I don't know. I think some of these people need to have done to them what they did to others. We're going to talk about the lobotomy.
Oh, now that was just pure cruelty.
There are different forms of lobotomies. I didn't even go into the electroconvulsive therapy, which is shock treatment.
I've seen footage of that, and it has scarred me. It has literally traumatized me, and I don't.
Well,
the fact that was actually a legitimate.
It's still a thing.
Form of therapy.
It is still a thing, but it is
grotesque to me.
It's been done. It's in a totally different way. I have never seen this done. I have seen the equipment that is used to do this. What it is in today's world, and this is for people who have severe, that they've tried every other form of treatment as far as depression and certain other psychiatric conditions, it produces a very mild seizure. Whereas the earlier ones, I mean, it wiped people's memories.
Yeah.
But today it doesn't do that. I mean, the seizure can last just a few seconds.
So it's slightly more ethical than previous.
Oh, yeah. And at least the people, they are told, what can happen. As in the past, they just jerked these people up and they, fried their brains. We actually had a relative that early on that they had used shock treatment on her.
We did? Who?
It was, you'll have to ask Mom. But it was back there, not been that long.
How far back? Like
probably around my grandmother's. It was during, her age group. And so, but that person had some depressive issues, and they had put her in a state hospital, and they had done the shock treatment on her. And any time that anybody said anything about the hospital, she would just cry hysterically.
Rightfully so.
Oh, yeah. It's like, would you want to go? It's like, yes, I want to go be tortured again. No.
Absolutely not.
But like I said, that is one therapy that they still use. It is very rare. They have modified it greatly. Now, with the lobotomies.
Do they still do lobotomies?
I don't think so.
I think they outlawed that, didn't they?
I would hope so. Anyhow, there was a type of, and it's prefrontal lobotomy, and this is, the forehead area. This is where your frontal lobes and prefrontal lobes are. And so Freeman Watts, at one point they had developed a technique, but it required drilling holes in the skull, so it's actually like a surgery type thing. Sort of like, is it trephination? Was that where they used to drill holes?
I think so. That was
an ancient thing to let the evil spirits out.
Yeah,
I wondered about that.
Out. And also give the brain some
breathing
air or
room.
whatever.
Yeah. And so Walter Freeman, he believed that the surgery would be unavailable to those that he thought needed it the most, which were patients in state mental hospitals that had no waiting room or no operating rooms, surgeons, anesthesia, and had limited budgets. So he wanted to do the Dollar Tree version of it.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so Freeman wanted to simplify the procedure so it could be carried out by psychiatrists in psychiatric hospitals. And he was inspired by the work of Italian psychiatrist Emiro Fimberti. Freeman at some point conceived of approaching the frontal lobes through the eye sockets instead of through drilled holes in the skull. In 1945, he took an ice pick from his own kitchen and began testing the idea on grapefruit and cadavers. This new transorbital lobotomy, and see this, I'm getting, when I start stammering like this, that means I'm getting emotionally escalated on it.
I mean, see, I've already done my research on this one, so I'm probably not going to get that upset about it.
I've heard about this for years, but it's still, this one's visceral for me.
I was thinking about actually getting one of those, like, it was used.
Oh, God, no.
One of those picks that was used.
No, you talk about something that haunted, an accursed object. Don't you bring it in this house. No. This new transorbital lobotomy involved lifting the upper eyelid and placing the point of a thin surgical instrument, often called an orbitoclast, let's see where it is, under the eyelid and against the top of the eye socket. A mallet was used to drive the orbitoclast through the thin layer of bone and into the brain along the plane of the bridge of the nose, around 15 degrees toward the interhemispherical fissure. The orbitoclast was malleted 2 centimeters or 2 inches into the frontal lobe and then pivoted 40 degrees at the orbit perforation, so the tip cut towards the opposite side of the head, toward the nose. The instrument was returned to the neutral position and sent a further 2 centimeters or 4/5 of an inch into the brain before being pivoted around 28 degrees each side to cut outwards and again inwards. In a more radical variation at the end of the last cut described, the butt of the orbitoclast was forced upwards, so the tool cut vertically down the side of the cortex of the interhemispheric fissure, which was called deep frontal cut. All cuts were designed to transect the white fibrous matter connecting the cortical tissue of the prefrontal cortex to the thalamus. Then the device was withdrawn and the procedure repeated on the other side. Freeman performed the first transorbital lobotomy on a live patient in 1946. Its simplicity suggested the possibility of carrying it out in mental hospitals lacking the surgical facilities required for the earlier, more complex procedure. In 1947, the Freeman and Watts partnership ended as the latter was disgusted by Freeman's modification of the lobotomy from a surgical operation into a simple office procedure.
No shit, they were disgusted
Between
by it.
1940 to 1944, 684 lobotomies were performed in the United States. However, because of the fervent promotion of the technique, marketing, by Freeman and Watts, those numbers increased sharply towards the end of the decade. In 1949, the peak year for lobotomies in the U.S., 5,074 procedures were undertaken, and by 1951, over 18,608 individuals had been lobotomized in the U.S. I'm not even going to take that last one. But ask your doctor about it. For real.
That's why I'm like, do they still do that? I don't think they do.
Just in a different form.
Yeah, spinal tap.
No, I mean, that's what I'm saying. As far as some of these things that are advertised, ask your doctor about it. And the doctor knows just as much as the people that are marketing it, and what they're willing to say and what they're not willing to say.
You know, it shocked some people that live in, like, England or whatever, that our country actually, like, advertises certain medications and such.
Yeah.
It's like they've never seen it there before.
Right. But also they can go into a pharmacy over there. I've heard that each medication is like $5, regardless of the medication.
Which that's how it should
that
be
they
here
could,
too.
Yeah, that they can go in and say, hey, I need an antibiotic.
Yeah.
Because that they still have some sense. But I think it's interesting within all these horrors. You know, like I said, the last one, as far as Mingla, no, I ain't got it in me tonight. It's interesting how that they would take someone like Jeffrey Dahmer, I have empathy for Jeffrey Dahmer. I really do.
Wasn't he the one that was like, I don't know why I did the things,
Right.
but I'm sorry that I did?
It was.
Or he showed like some sort of regret.
He did. But it was a matter of him drilling holes into the skulls.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what he wanted to do was create something like MK Ultra wanted to create.
Oh.
He wanted somebody that would never leave him.
Yeah.
And he didn't, and so they put him in prison and they do all these things. And he was responsible for how many deaths? Was it 10? Was it under 10?
I think it was about 10. It was close to 10 at least.
Okay, as compared to these people that have impaired and killed thousands.
Yeah.
Huh.
Why weren't they treated the same way?
Because he didn't have the right uniform on.
Because he didn't have the letters behind his name.
Yeah. So when we look at things like that, and it's like, again, rules for thee, but not for me.
Mm-hmm. I don't like that.
Mad scientists, don't be one. If you see somebody hurting somebody, if you're afraid that to get involved or whatever, you can press a 911 button discreetly.
Oh, yeah. On the iPhone, literally all you have to do is press the power button a few times and it's already calling 911.
Yeah.
I did that by accident while
no.
I was mowing one time because I thought it was the volume rocker. Luckily, our signal booster wasn't working, so I had no
that's
signal.
Good.
Yeah.
But I mean, I cannot imagine people becoming that jaded that they would see somebody being harmed. And if, like I said, if you're afraid to step in and try to physically stop whomever, that would put you at risk unless you have specific training. But you can pick up a phone, and I mean, my God, he was too busy hurting this woman that somebody could have gone to the back of the train or whatever and said, hey, 911, we got somebody that's hurting somebody. Y'all
Absolutely.
need to send somebody now.
I've heard so many stories of people from New York, literally people jumping in front of the trains almost daily.
That's horrifying.
And some people are like, yeah, it's just another day. It's so annoying. Like, it's a person. It's an inconvenience to them.
They don't see them as people.
No, they don't. And it's like, that's a person that was hurting so much that they would do that. It's monstrous.
And it's like we have to examine ourselves. And that was what the Milgram experiment does. That it makes us face the monsters within ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you get into the Carl Jung stuff.
Right.
Who do we choose to be? Do we choose to be the villain? Do we choose to be the good guy? We're always a combination of both, but it's a matter of which side that you give into.
Right.
So, we will go to the fun, spoopy things because, as far as phantoms and ghouls and vampires and stuff, compared to what we've discussed for the past 2 nights, oh no. We don't even, maybe that's the reason those myths have gone down, because what we're facing is so much worse.
Oh yeah, more than likely that is why. Because those are absolutely horrific things that have been done, and there's even more horrific things that are being done today, and nobody's saying anything about it.
Exactly. Because
and that
we haven't.
If you do speak out about it, you get silenced.
You become the heretic, and so therefore you're irredeemable. I'm a heretic. Sign me up. Anyhow, so we will return to much lighter subjects tomorrow. And if you've had experiences with paranormal, supernatural encounters, UFOs, aliens, there's been no account of any alien anything that can come close to what these people have reported for real.
Nope.
The probing apparently is not that bad.
Apparently not.
So, if you've got...
I would rather be probed than have that shit done to me.
Oh, yeah. And
because at least then they can't remember it all that well.
Right. I mean, give me the Bigfoot. Give me the Squatch on the front porch.
I'll take Bigfoot any day.
Absolutely.
Of course, Bigfoot never scared me, but...
Well, no. Anyhow, if you've got family or local myths, legends, whatever, and God love you if anybody has had a family member that has had to experience any of these horrors. And again, God help us all.
Yep.
So, my intention tomorrow is to discuss wizards.
Warlocks?
There's a difference between wizards and warlocks, and we'll explore that.
What's the difference?
I don't know. We're going to find out.
I thought they were both the same thing.
You're a wizard, Harry.
I'm a what?
So if there's anything that you would like to send us an email, cupofcoffeewithscream@gmail.com. Just be aware that was the point in all this. Just be aware.
Mm-hmm.
And share this with others, even if they don't want to hear it. They need to hear it. These kids, we've got them operating and they are blind.
Absolutely. Some of these things I want to cry because of that. That's
absolutely, because you've got a heart. Because you've got a heart. The people that can just listen to this and go, oh yeah, whatever. Those are the ones that concern me. So. But
and the only thing we can do is speak out about it. And
absolutely. And edify others to try. At least we can try to prevent it from happening again. Mm-hmm. If we can't prevent it in the world at large, at least we can be the positive force in our little microcosms.
Absolutely.
Yep. Know that you all are very loved. Thank you for spending the time to listen to us, to share coffee with us. Like I said, these are hardcore. These are not the fun spoopies, but they're necessary. So anyhow, you all have a beautiful, blessed day. We can walk down the road if we want to. We can eat a bag of potato chips if we want to. We can go outside and look at the sunshine. There's a whole lot of people that can't right now. Pray for those people.
Absolutely.
So anyhow, we'll see you on the next cup. Bye.
Subscribe.